evening, everyone. I would like to call to order and welcome you to the Wilbraham Regional School District School Committee meeting. It is 6:31 p.m. I see that Wilbraham Public Access Channel is recording. Is there anyone else here recording this meeting? Okay, we will begin with roll call and alphabetical order. Cheryl Caruana? Here. Tim Collins?
Present.
Sean Kennedy?
Here.
Lisa Murray?
Here.
Rich Redeker?
Here.
Mike Terabasi?
Yep.
Michelle Pedro? Here. If you would please stand. Lisa will lead us in the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going to begin with our student representative, Katie Sinikin. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I want to do a brief presentation about our hiatus trip that we went on and express how grateful all of us that attended were that we got to go, and thank all of you, in addition to our advisors and administration, for allowing us to go and giving us that opportunity. The presentation is on the floor behind you. Miss Fallon, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. When we were at Hyannis, we participated in the Special Olympics polar plunge where we raised $1,120 and our goal was $1,000. Our theme this year was Stranger Things, as every year that we go, each school dresses up in a different theme, competing for best costume and just having fun with it. In addition to that, we had 2 keynote speakers. Blanking on the second one's name, but the other one that we had was Brandon White, who shared their story and about how they came about their journey in their position in their life. After that, we also had campaigning where we campaigned for Lucy Haile. Her theme was all about the Buna ceremony. Through the process, we did all 3 days that we were there, and we was able to help her get to the end result that she had wanted of becoming the 2026 to 2027 MASC President of Massachusetts. For banquet and awards, our Advisor Mrs. O'Sullivan was nominated for that award. We also had nominated Nina Samani for Unsung Hero, and then for Commonwealth Award, it was Lucy Hale, Lila Britton, and myself. In addition to that, we also had gotten Top 10 Project Award and 5-star and Gold Council of Excellence. In addition to that, we also did our lip sync competition this year where we did Justin Bieber and we had placed second. We also did leadership workshops where each of us attended 4 of them, and then a couple of us had presented a workshop when we were there. Next slide. Thank you. Our Hyannis theme this year and why they had chose this theme was climbing to the top of Mount Olympus. The whole idea behind it was that you start at the bottom and you have to climb your way up through the different leaders and like their leadership styles through that entire journey. And then these are some of the pictures that we had taken from like banquet, polar plunge, free time, getting ready for lip sync. And then if you want to go to the next one, just some more. And then the next one. And then next. So through the process, when we got home from MASC, I had asked everyone who was interested to write a little testimony about their experience and what they had thought through the entire process. I had gotten a lot of responses from it, and I had picked a few that I thought were really well written and really important that you guys should see. Joey Wadowitz had said, MASC is a place I never would have expected to find myself at a year ago, but I gave it a chance, put in my application, and was absolutely blessed with this special opportunity. I had no idea what to expect when I arrived. I was pleasantly surprised by the incredible number of energetic and welcoming people, each with their own wisdom and experience in leadership. MASC introduced me to a community that I was able to connect and grow with in a way that I had no idea was possible. It changed my perspective on student council and leadership in general, teaching me how to collaborate and inspire others while inspiring myself to step outside of my comfort zone and taking that first step. I had an amazing experience at MASC and hope to attend once more. And then one other was Nina Samani, who said, as someone who has been lucky enough to attend MASC for the past 4 years, I could go on for days about how special it is to me. I've made some true friends at the conference every year, whether it has been new people in my own council or those in different ones. When my freshman year self applied for the conference, I told myself I might as well apply because I doubt I would ever be someone to get it. I had little to no confidence in myself, never making myself stand out in a crowd, but it wasn't until I accepted and attended my first MASC conference when it all changed. My perspective on communications, collaboration, and people in a way that helped ignite this spark in me. Ever since, I have only grown with every year of student council and every year of MASC. There have been so many ups and of course a bit of downs, but if it weren't for the friendships and experience I have made in the past 4 years, I don't believe I would be the person I am today. And then my last one was Tyler Supsack. He said, MASC was a complete turnaround in my leadership journey. As a delegate towards this great event, I transitioned to a state of comfortability and tranquility. By being able to voice my thoughts while having people listen to me granted me a higher sense of confidence and exposed a more understanding side of my character. From the conference, I met many new people, which I was constantly able to share jokes with, marking a change toward how I interact with others. Overall, the learning experience helped build my character further and thus allow me to assert myself as a student leader. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Cadence?
No, I love the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We are going to continue with the superintendent's update.
Thank you. We're actually going to continue with our amazing students. As you know, from time to time we have installations of student work in the IRC, and one day while perambulating through the IRC, I came across this display of Tucker automobiles, and not only that, but I ran into the student who put together the display, and he began talking to me about them, and I realized that we had within our midst perhaps the Western Mass expert on the Tucker automobile. And knowing that the IRC is the home field of the HWRSD School Committee, I asked him if he would be willing to share some of his knowledge with us all at one of our meetings, and he agreed to. So Lowell Key, known to us all as DK, is in the back of the room, and he's ready to share his work with us if we could just sort of work our way over there.
Tucker wanted a light that moved with the steering wheel, but the center headlight was the only one that moved due to safety concerns. There were also pop-out windshields, which can be seen on the blue rubber up there, and safety cushions on the dash, and even seat belts, though no one wanted them. There was also a built-in roll cage. This will become important later. Coach doors and a rear prime mover, or engine. This engine was based on a Franklin helicopter engine used in World War II. The car had all the safety features you could want, and the most gorgeous design. It even inspired the 1950 and 51 Studebaker Champney and Commander, my personal favorites. The four cars up there are number 1000, the Tin Goose, the prototype, number 1001, the first production tucker, number 1026, the halfway mark, and number 1050, the last production tucker before the continuation series. Number 1000 was the first ever Tucker automobile produced. She was a car person Tucker showed at the reveal of the Tucker 48. The Tin Goose, number 1000, has some differences from the production Tuckers, such as standard opening doors instead of coach doors, and a sharper front bumper than the press. The Tin Goose is preserved at the Sturgis Antique Car Museum in Huntington, Pennsylvania, alongside 1013, who is used in chase scene in the movie Tucker the Man in the Street. Tucker number 1001 is the first true production Tucker made, with all others following her design until 1026. 1001 is preserved at the Antique Automobile Club of America Museum in Hershey, Pennsylvania, alongside 1026 and 1022. Now 1026 is the golden one up there. She's the only Tucker 48 with the Tucker-matic transmission. The Tucker-matic was the automatic transmission of the Tucker Motor Company. She's also the first to have the gas cap on the front left fender, despite my paper cuts. All seemingly having it there, despite the early ones not. She has some special door handles that are more similar to other cars of the 40s, and not the usual handles that her sisters had. 1026's place in history has been realized, as she's preserved at the ABCA Museum in Hershey, Pennsylvania, alongside 1022 and the previous 1001. 1050 is the last production Tucker built before the continuation series. She was built with no engine and no transmission. Nostalgic Motoring has a two-part story getting her running online. She's owned by Mark Wilbraham, CEO, and is still Nostalgic Motoring alongside one of her silver sisters, 1029. Engine number 33598 was an engine that was put in. Now, the pale Tucker, the orange Tucker, the purple Tucker, and the blue Tucker are the lost Tuckers. They were those victims of an unfortunate event. Oh, sorry. They were victims of a series of unfortunate events. 1018, the tan one, is one of the four. This car was recognized in
Okay, so I will admit this wasn't the world's best planning because after Cadence and DK, you're stuck with me through the next several reports. Let me start with attendance, if I can, or enrollment rather, if I can find that. Our enrollment for April 1st is 2,825 students. That is virtually unchanged since March 1st, just a change of one student. We had one more preschooler join us and 2 10th graders leave us. Next, I'll go to a strategic plan update.
Just quickly, was the 10th graders that left, they weren't dropping out, they just moved out of district?
I believe they were changes of residency.
Okay, thank you.
So, our strategic plan calls for us to develop a way, a process, and a plan for communicating, teaching, learning, and achievement in the district. This short presentation talks about how we've come to do that. I'll tell you that this work aligns directly with the district review and the self-assessment that we completed as part of the district review, as well as the on-site which took place last week. For those of you who've learned to speak district review, this is standard 3.3.2 and 3.3.3, which is first assessing students and then sharing the assessment data with families. So in our district, moving on to slide 2, we really have one vision with 2 models, and that really has to do with the developmental differences of students. Through pre-K through 5, the focus is on developmental monitoring, and we use detailed rubrics to describe where a student is on the path to mastering foundational skills. So that's called standards-based assessment. In the secondary focus, there's a shift. When we start doing assessment and communicating to families at the secondary level, the real focus of that type of communication is on signaling readiness for post-secondary life. Our number and letter grades aligned to really what's the selection criteria for higher education. So it's one of the more controversial parts of grading and communicating learning at the secondary level. But essentially, all of the opportunities for students in post-secondary life, really in school, in athletics, and even world of work, align with a GPA of 3.0 or better. So basically a B or higher. And so our assessment system shifts to basically telling students and families whether they're on that pathway of success with a 3.0 or higher. So moving on to the next slide, just to talk a little bit more about what these look like. This slide talks about just an example of what a standards-based protocol looks like. So at elementary, grades are not subjective. They're explicitly tied to the expectations of our core curriculum, such as Amplify CCAL-A for literacy or illustrative math. This provides clarity for families by using standards-based model. We provide parents with a clear roadmap of what a student should know and be able to do by the end of the year. And the goal is to be able to show us positive progression throughout the year, moving from a beginning understanding to an independent mastery of grade level standards. Moving on to the next one. This slide shows an actual rubric for standard 1.0A.A, which is operations and algebraic thinking. You can note that the protocol includes specific checkpoints and needed assessments for each term. This ensures that the grade reported to the family is backed by consistent documented evidence of learning. And this level of detail removes the mystery from grading, allowing teachers and parents to see exactly which curriculum units are used to inform each level of proficiency. Moving on to the next slide. So I'm now taking a look at 6 to 12. Here the idea is more about dynamic feedback. The secondary level, the student information system protocol is our primary system of providing close to real-time feedback communication to families. So it's more like a dashboard. Students' averages change throughout the term as new grades are added, and they can see where they are doing in that sort of GPA model, if you will, trying to maintain a 3.0 or better. The communication tool here emphasizes access to information about where the student currently stands, focus on transparently sharing where the student is so that they can know where their opportunities lie, or whether they're on track for opportunities if they have ambitions towards honor classes or AP classes, so that they can help set and plan for their future goals. So by utilizing traditional achievement markers, we ensure that our students are speaking the language of college admissions while maintaining the high standards set by the district. Moving on to the next slide. This talks about providing support and bridge and assistance for students who may require different support or modifications. So for students requiring additional assistance, we have established even more frequent data sharing protocols. Our Title I progress reports provide some more information for families, a more detailed and fine-grained assessment of how they're doing. Similarly, students with IEPs receive progress reports in addition to report cards, so they can see how students are doing with respect to the goals and objectives in their IEPs, as well as how they're doing with respect to the standards in the district curriculum. So moving forward to the next slide. I believe we've successfully established the systems and tools needed to communicate achievement effectively across all the grades. As we move forward, we'll focus on ensuring that these protocols are implemented with consistency across every classroom in the school. As a final thought, I'll share that we have just shared many examples of all of this with the district review team. I think this was standard 3, as I said. There were probably at least 20 different samples of report cards and different types of reports of student progress that we shared with the team. So they'll provide us with some feedback on what their impressions are of the quality and level of detail that we're providing to families, so that we can make further adjustments as we move forward. But I think we do have the system in place that the strategic plan envisioned. And that's my report.
How long do you anticipate, by the way, great report, how long do you anticipate it to be before you've rolled this out all grades?
I'd say we're there.
Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, great, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, so we will continue. Thank you. We'll continue with old business, school calendar for the 26-27 school year.
There was just a Scrivener's error in the calendar that you approved. Good Friday next year is actually March 26th. I think we had it as April 2nd. So it doesn't affect anything other than that date. So that's just informational piece.
So we'll continue with,
Wait, does that need reapproval or we're good?
It doesn't.
Okay, thank you.
continue with old business of reductions in force and whether or not, whether to notice additional staff contingent upon the outcome of the annual town meeting. So this is just going to be a discussion and a vote.
So we met with the unions earlier this week to prepare reduction in force notices, so-called pink slips, based on the school committee's approved budget. As you know, there were some reductions in force affecting Unit A, which is teachers, and the clerical unit. So we identified the staff who would be affected by the layoffs. We also talked about a timeline, specifically with respect to Unit A. It's a little bit tighter because they all have the same language, more or less, but the language talks about 30 days prior to the date of implementation, and since teachers and paraprofessionals work on the school year, contract rather than a sort of ever-going contract that just rolls from year to year. That 30 days prior to the end of the year brings us to April 24th, which is during April vacation. There is it is best practice to do this in person with staff. You don't want to just have them receive a notice in the mail saying that they're subject to a reduction in force, which means that we want to have the opportunity to meet with staff prior to April vacation, so that backs our timeline up a little bit more. And there is an interest on the part of staff of knowing whether they're potentially subject to a reduction in force, so that they can begin the process of looking for other work, essentially. Now we know the staff who were affected in the discussions that we had earlier this week, regardless of what happens, are in that position. The unknown here is what happens if the budget approved by the school committee isn't approved by the towns. And so what we're looking for at this point is, should we issue some additional layoff notices in the event that one of the budgets, or the budget isn't approved in one of the both of the towns? Because by the time those town meetings come around, we will be beyond the notice date for teachers and paraprofessionals for sure, or possibly some other units as well.
Can we just talk for a minute about the process, correct? So if we take our budget that we have approved, the committee has approved, and we send it to town meeting, okay? If one town says yes, one town says no, or they both say no, okay, it seems to me, and please help me if I'm incorrect here, then we are at an impasse. We can submit another budget to both towns, but then they'd have to have town meetings again in order to vote on those. So it's either a yay or a nay, correct?
So if a town meeting votes against the budget, in whatever form that may take, the first step is for the school committee to re-evaluate the budget. If you are to adjust your budget to match with the appropriation from the town meeting, you would sort of take the vote of the budget again. If those numbers match, you notify the towns. They wouldn't necessarily have to take any other action at that point. They're not compelled to take action because it fits within their budgetary guidelines and their actual appropriation. If, on the other hand, you as a committee take up the question of the budget and either stay with one you voted last week or a week and a half ago, or pick a different budget, but it still requires some change by the one or both of the communities, then that's when you sort of fall into that circumstance of them having to call potentially another town meeting and going into that process.
So is it the town's objective that if they vote no for what we asked for, they do have to come up with a number?
Well, I mean, the worst case scenario would be if they didn't vote at all. If that's the case...
Well, no, if they voted no. They voted no, we do not like the budget, we do not accept that budget. Do they have to say, we will put forth a budget for this? Is that something that they do? I thought it was a yes or no.
No, they can. They can, so, and it depends on how the moderator wants to run the meeting and how they've potentially articulated the budget components in their town meeting warrant. There are essentially three components to our budget: a capital assessment, a debt assessment, and an operating assessment. Then even if there's one single vote as part of their broader budget, they may do them independently. But if any piece of that fails, the totality of that is our assessment to the towns, and therefore they take votes. So any of those fail, and technically the budgets fail. But they can appropriate anywhere from $0 to some other number at that point. So they can reject outright, not fund the schools at all, which is a whole different problem. More than likely, they would vote, at least for the operating budget, some number that they feel like they can afford. And then that's, so they could pick a number for appropriation purposes so that then you as a school committee have something with which to work with. But technically they could vote $0 for schools, which would be challenging to say the least.
Right, so last year we had one of the towns didn't approve one piece, and that was fine. We said, okay, if we subtract that piece, they've already approved that, so then we can make the adjustments. I'm just worried that if the towns just say, here's the school budget as presented, all those in favor, all those against, and the nays have it, and it doesn't pass in either town, is it then required by the town to say, but here's something that, here's another number, or how do they go for it? Because I thought that's what I was always afraid of, is that they would just vote it down and leave it, and then in order for us, then it would require a whole nother town meeting for both towns in order to get it passed. So is it standard procedure in both towns that if they do vote down the budget, they put up another number instead?
I think they typically offer an alternative for people to vote.
Okay.
If they, if one town didn't vote and one town did, it's only the town that hasn't appropriated money that would have to actually call another town meeting.
Right.
And so I think that's one piece is it doesn't necessarily force both towns to have a meeting if
If it goes down, right, they don't need to vote on it again. It's going to be less than the assessment they voted for.
The other thing I will say is that I believe they're legally compelled to fund schools because children are legally required to go to school. So they're likely to vote some number versus $0, because if they don't appropriate anything for the assessment for the regional school, they're gonna, I'm not sure that the state's going to accept their town meeting results.
Okay. So that being said, has either of the town reached out to anyone here on the committee and said anything about the number that we sent to them as, yes, that this is fine, this is what we're going to put forward, or that, oh no, we're not going to be able to do this?
I sent a text message when we passed the budget to a member of Hamden Advisory. The only response I've had to that was, I think we can work with that. So what wasn't a yes or no, that was a, I think we can work with that. I have, the feedback I've gotten from Wilbraham Income is that I don't think that there would be an issue on the Wilbraham side. I just, so in full public meeting disclosure, I have texted the head of FinCom, Todd, to confirm whether or not they've actually voted on the school budget or not. I don't know if they voted as to whether or not they're going to recommend supporting the school budget, which doesn't approve the school budget, but at town meeting, they stand up and they say, we support this. And then everybody who's there then votes whether they go along with it. And a lot of the time when FinCom says, we support this and we have it funded, everybody votes yes. Or, not everybody. Everybody never votes yes, but, 90% of people vote yes. So,
can I go back to the reduction in force? So, John, if the budget isn't approved, then if we haven't notified those other people, we haven't met the obligation of notifying them in an appropriate amount of time.
That's correct.
So we're obligated to notify everybody in a certain amount at an appropriate time.
Well, there is the issue of fiscal exigency, which you could declare. I don't know exactly what the legal parameters or qualifications are to declare a fiscal exigency. I guess, there is some question right now around whether or not the budget will be supported in both of the towns. And so I think a reasonable person could argue you might want to cover yourself at least a little bit in case it doesn't pass.
I would think if it doesn't pass, we would want those people to know ahead of time, because that's the right thing to do for those staff members.
do you have a number of proposed additional notifications in mind, John? I find it hard to get my mind around, like, how many, right? Because, if we say, okay, well, let's say, if the budget is set at, you know, $450 as Hamden's contribution, you know, that's gonna be like reduction of at least another probably 20 people, right?
I've imagined this in two approaches. One would be to say, to include all of the reductions in that sort of two-tiered list of cuts that I had brought, even though I know that you rejected many of them. So because those would probably be the ones that we'd be talking about again if the budget didn't pass in one of the communities. That, I think, brought it down to a number that I believe, from what I had heard, probably would be sustainable under all of the scenarios. The other way would be to say, we don't know, let's just really be sure and reduce send layoff notices to everyone who was hired last year.
Even though this is ancient history, back in the last century, when I was out in Long Meadow, every non-tenured teacher got a layoff notice every April. And then almost everybody was hired again over the summer. And the advantage of that was, because I got one every year for my first 3 years, is you were eligible for unemployment actually once you had that notice. So that was.
How many teachers were hired last year?
That was just,
Elementary teachers. Right.
so I can tell you there were about 10 elementary teachers. I believe there were a number of secondary as well.
Well, since we have no idea what the funding gap is, I think that might be reasonable. Okay, so I have confirmation that Wilbraham FinCom voted to support the full budget that we proposed. So, and that's passed, so we at least know that little piece of the puzzle. I won't vote in favor of any, I don't know, are we voting, or is this just recommendations we're giving? Because
I think we're still having a conversation.
No, I know.
We're discussing and voting
Yeah.
on whether or not to provide these.
So,
Does either town need a 2.5 override to fund what we proposed last time?
I don't think so. However, I think that Hamden will have to make some hard choices to be able to fund it. And I don't put it so that, you know, that's their house. So I would not presume to tell them how to manage their house.
We do have the inside line on that, I think. I mean, Michelle, as the
They haven't
assistant
voted.
treasurer.
They have not voted. The advisory has not voted, and they're waiting for their public hearing, so they've not made a decision on whether or not they are going to vote favorably for that budget. So the public hearing will be in about 2 weeks.
Do they have a budget put together that could support it?
I think they have to look at all the departments, and so we fit in as the school department, but they have to look at. So it's, you know, my understanding is that the budget that we put forth would impact what they are able to do for all the other departments. I know they have not made a decision.
To me, no matter what, because we're just guessing, we have no idea what's actually going to happen, it's not right to not notify people. They have a right to know. I would want to know. I feel like everybody here would want to know.
And just to put that in context, so April 24th is the deadline that we need to know. That is a week of April break. So there's only 2 weeks that you have to be able to notify people. So
And
we're not talking
it is,
about a long time.
and it is appropriate that they talk about it with their building administrators and not receive it in a different way. So we want to do that before vacation.
I agree with you.
Do you know what the date is for Hamden? Is it 2 weeks from when? Is that going to be, are we going to have a meeting after that, or, you know, before the deadline?
I'll have to double check.
So potentially we could have a proposal to accept all of the reductions accept the strings. You could choose to include the strings, but I'll vote no for sure. So, but we've got 7 people on the committee. But I think we know Tim's gonna vote no for also, so.
But this is
No,
just a notification.
But,
This is just notification.
Right,
This
just
is not, we're not
notification, and then-
permanently saying, this is not an absolute that we are eliminating any positions.
let me finish the sentence and then it's all yours, Tim, I'll give you the microphone. But also add in all the teachers that were hired last year. If we're talking about, we need to let anyone who could possibly be in jeopardy know in fairness to the position. I think that would be, that would hopefully be enough of a blanket to cover us. But I don't really know how we would possibly have the students be taught. But if that many people were reduced, Tim, all you.
I agree with Lisa. I think we need to send the notices out based on worst case scenario. So that should the worst case scenario happen, these people have notifications, they have time to plan their lives, and the schools have time to plan their adjustments. Because when you lose a staff member, that's going to change the whole makeup of the school, and that takes some time as well. So my recommendation would be to, when you're talking to people, you can say, hey, here's the budget we passed, and these are the only cuts that will be required. But worst case scenario, we might have to cut this many, and for those, this is why you're getting the notice, because we have to notify you, and it's only fair to you and to your schools that they know this potential is there. And maybe that'll wake some people up too.
Just so we're on the same page, can you just let us know, without providing personal information, of course, who this would include, who these notifications would be going out to?
Sure. So there's 2 separate groups. So in the first group that you were talking about, staff who were impacted by the list of cuts, those are really 2-step processes. Those are like the ones that were included in many of the reductions that were included in the school committee budget, because many of those were professional status teachers who had the ability to what we call bump other teachers, which means those whose position was being reduced were notified that they had the opportunity to claim someone else's position, and the person whose position is being claimed is notified. So you have one person whose job, who ends up without a job, but you have 2 people who are being notified. So those reductions that were on a list, many of those are PTS, so those would be 2, like double notifications. When you're talking about people who were hired in the last year, none of those would be professional status teachers, so those would be singletons. You would be notifying just those. And just to sort of go back to Mr. Collins' comment, as we were envisioning this, we were kind of thinking of them as 2 separate conversations. One of like, this position is not in the school committee's budget. This is a definite cut. And then other types of conversations like, we don't know, this position is in the school committee's budget. If it passes at town meeting, we'll be coming to you right after the town meeting and saying, you come back. But right now we're just notifying you because we're uncertain about the status of the town meeting.
If I can just go over, it just helps with the timeline. So we have a school committee meeting on April 16th, correct? April 17th is the day before vacation. Is that correct? Yep, at least that's what I have there. So I guess the 17th would be the deadline for sending out these letters so that the building administrator can reach out directly to these people.
Sean, I think John wanted to have time to talk to this person. So if we have to decide tonight.
Yeah, and also it's usually considered not best practice to deliver this type of news on Friday before a long vacation.
Okay. And when is the meeting where Hamden Advisory school vacation.
They don't have school vacation.
Okay. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I just was saying during school vacation week, so there's nothing we can do during that week. But when do we have to give the letters to? What's the drop dead, or give notification to? When's the drop dead?
It's the 24th, which is the Friday of school vacation week.
Yeah, okay.
Just to clarify, if somebody doesn't get a notice, if let's say you send no notice, does that mean nobody can be reduced to force?
Well, it means that there would definitely be a grievance that we didn't follow the contract.
That's the penalty. I said they did it. I didn't worry about it much when I got those because it was just sent to everybody with 3 years or less teaching experience, just so that it covered the school committee in case they needed to reduce, positions.
So they're having the public hearing for their budget. I guess it's the whole town's budget during school vacation week. I mean, I'd like to say that timing is really unfortunate because if there are any parents that were going to be looking to speak out and advocate at that meeting, they're likely to be out of town. So their audience is going to be skewed.
I don't know what.
I know, you don't have any control.
No, what I was going to say is, when if you look historically, I mean, I can find out, I don't know, I can ask or have them speak to it, but past years, I don't think that they have people filling the room, advocating for, a certain budget.
That happened after
My thoughts on this is that we need to make these notifications as early as we can. As early as we can, so that people in the community start taking us seriously. I mean, I've heard a lot of mistrust out there. You said you were going to cut, you didn't do it, blah, 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 blah. When you get that pink slip, that's real. And you're going to talk to your family members, you're going to talk to your neighbors, and maybe that'll kickstart some of these people to start actively. Now, we're not going to solve this problem immediately, but we've got to make them aware of the fact that if we keep going the direction we've been going in the last 4 or 5 years, this school system is not going to keep the reputation that keeps people wanting to send their children here.
I think we're all in agreement that we should make, give people as much notice as we can. I get that. What I would hope that we could do is let's say what if all the cuts on the list, what if all those cuts aren't enough, right? So then we're saying we're going to do it for all, new teachers. Is that a smart move, or is there something else? Is there another level that you've prepared of potential cuts if we have to make them?
No, I think those are the only 2 options. And what I'm hearing is it might be good to do both options, just to make sure we got enough. And I go back to what I said, if they're not necessary, we would do recalls immediately. We get the recalls out before the end of the school year so that people don't walk out the door thinking they don't have a job.
Any additional questions, or may I have a motion?
All right, I'd like to make a motion that we direct the superintendent to issue, notify additional staff of the possibility of reduction to include all of the cuts in all of the levels of the proposal, excluding the half-time strings, which would then, and in addition, all teachers that have been working for the school district for only 1 year.
I'd like to offer an amendment that to include the strings in that. Not that, hopefully we won't have to do it, but to include it in the options.
Sean, somebody's got to second the motion before you can try to amend it, I think.
Oh,
I'm making the motion to include all of the actions of John's cuts, excluding the strings cut in the middle school, which is only a half-time cut and would convert a full-time teacher to a half-time position. so then they'll probably leave. So it's really, we would probably lose chorus and strings at middle school. Okay. So, in addition to all of his proposed cuts, because that may not be enough, every teacher that's been working for the school district for only 1 year.
How many of those are?
I think they gave us an estimate of a little more than 10, but they don't know the exact number.
Does that include the strings teacher or not?
Can I ask a clarifying question, which I think is embedded in your motion, but just for the sake of the people who will be voting? Does your motion include those who worked less than a year in the district?
A year or less.
Okay.
Is there a second?
I'm going to second Sean's.
But we're not there yet.
We're not there.
We're on Mike's motion.
Rich,
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Rich, did you second it?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Not second it, then someone else can make the motion,
Okay.
like Sean, and then you might not hear it then.
I rescind it then.
No,
So
what if
we,
we,
was gonna second it and then the amendment. How do you?
So are you gonna keep your second, or are you rescinding?
John, you want to keep it or not? Or you just gonna amend it?
I'll make a whole nother amendment unless Mike's amendment passes or gets a second. It seems like, does that have a second, anybody?
I rescind it. That's the
All right.
I did second it.
He did.
I would like a
But you-
discussion on the amendment.
Right, but we have to deal with the motion that's on the floor before we can vote on the amendment.
I thought it was seconded, that's when I proposed it, so I made a mistake.
And if it was, I just make sure everybody's speaking to the microphone, and then it's on. Okay, so there was no second? No,
he was seconding.
that wasn't
So
particularly-
I regretfully make an amendment, make a motion where we send RIFs to all of the educators and administrators that are on the list, and as well as to the teachers who have been hired in the last year or the last 3 years. What was it last year? Is that what you were looking for, John?
I believe that last year would probably provide enough in any foreseeable circumstance.
Okay, so then that would be regrettably for all of the reductions that were on the list, and also regrettably to everyone who's been in the district for 1 year.
you really want to kill the strings.
I do not. I want to give the superintendent the option, and I don't know how much money we're going to have to, we don't have enough guidance to understand how much money, or maybe what we have is fine. I'm just saying, we need to send it out.
As opposed to,
Yeah.
anyway, we'll see if someone's not.
I said regrettably so many times.
We'll see if someone seconds Sean's motion.
Is there a second for
and then
that
we'll
motion?
have a discussion.
Is there a second? Okay,
Second,
There you go.
okay.
discussion now.
So discussion, I just have a quick comment to make about, we're being very, very specific about which positions, and I think, and I could be wrong, and maybe I could hear from you. So the items the request was, and the discussion and vote was whether to notify the additional staff contingencies about, the additional, to provide the additional notification to staff beyond the budget that we passed last week. And I think that while I understand everyone's sentiment and, wanting to, name, I don't know that we need to be that specific. We could just direct the superintendent whether or not we would like him to issue the additional notifications.
I think what I would say with that is, we had talked about 2 tiers of discussions. All of these would be in that second tier of discussion. These are all positions that are included in the school committee's budget. If you tell me to do a specific position or not to do a specific position, it doesn't mean you're cutting it from your budget. It doesn't mean that you couldn't later on direct some other cut in order to come to the budget to preserve that position. It's just saying that we're putting the person on notice that they might potentially be facing a cut if the budget that the school committee passed isn't supported by the towns. Not saying it's an automatic done deal.
The advantage of doing it that, Mike, is maybe people would get the message that they better really have their voices heard, so we don't have to make these cuts no longer.
Well, and also, all the positions are vital.
I don't want to insinuate that any position is not vital, because they're all vital. And even the budget we approved, I think, goes deeper than it needed to go. And I think it's important that the public hears and that the towns realize that, you know, every year the budget comes forward and we start with the level budget and then, okay, let's start making cuts and reductions. Okay. Where we went with the budget this year with the cuts and reductions, next year we're going to start with the level budget. And I fully expect to hear a report from John that reductions that were made last year, that we have some that we discovered to be horribly untenable and unworkable. We got mentioned from the state that we have absolutely no educational coaches and so forth. So I hope the towns understand that next year we're going to start with the level budget and there's going to be additions to it and there's not going to be cuts. That's what I expect is going to happen, is the position that we're going to be in. Not that we want to be in that position, but it's just the realism of, you know, how much was cut for the budget. That being said, we all heard testimony from multiple people in the music department about how, you know, that the Strings and Friends program will not be able to reabsorb middle school students. So if we stop the strings program in the middle school, which this is a half-time position, we're talking about $36,000, okay, there will be no middle school string education, which means that the Strings and Friends will end at the grade school, kids will be cut loose to the breeze, and then, you know, and then we expectedly, the high school orchestra program will become unraveled because there'll be no students getting fed into it except maybe one or two where parents continue to do private lessons, right? So I think that, you know, when that was put on the list, you know, I just want to, you know, this is not my impression, I'm trying to reiterate things that we all heard testimony on. And the additional complication of losing chorus in the middle school, because it's very unlikely a music teacher is going to stay at a half-time position when we have really phenomenal music teachers and they'll be sought after and they'll be able to get a full-time position somewhere else. So, you know, its entire program collapse is what we could be looking at, Feed there. And if you look at the history of other school districts and what happens when you start to do just little whittle away at music, things unravel quickly and it takes decades to rebuild. So that's why I'm against it and that's why I'm going to vote no. But, and I realize we're not saying to cut that and that this is just notices, but obviously you guys all know I feel strongly about this, and I'm going to shut up and let everybody else say their piece because that's important.
I agree with everything you said. And music really does make a difference across the whole academic. And there's studies out there that actually prove that. And the vote you took, this committee took, has told this community that we see that as a priority. But I don't know what's going to happen in this budgetary situation. And I don't want to be stuck in a situation where, because I don't know how it's going to play out. The whole bumping situation, we may have some professional teacher status people who may end up bumping another person out. I'm not sure how it's going to work itself out. So I think we have to, you know, if there's a chance that, I don't know, I'm really torn because I've seen back in my other capacity as the president of Springfield, I've seen what happens when you get a good music program established, and I have seen academic growth across the board. And so I agree with you, this is very important. But this is, you've already made that statement with the budget you passed. And from my perspective, I don't want to see any cuts whatsoever. But we have to be careful and make sure that we don't end up in a situation where, and it may not be the music department, but it could be another department where we're laying somebody off that's going to really hurt that school, but we want to let them know this is a possibility. It would be unfair to not let these people who don't have professional teacher status get, if we can get the towns to agree to what we voted on, you're okay. But if not, we're going to have to go deeper, and we don't know how that's going to work itself out. And I think we'd be back at the table having this discussion, and I would advocate for what you're asking for. But just to cover ourselves, because I don't want to see it work out that we end up in an arbitration case that we could possibly lose that would force us to hire somebody back that we were willing to let go of the budget we passed. And that means somebody else has got to go. I mean, it's a real tough situation. We're being asked to make a decision in the dark. And I think the only prudent thing to do is start with worst case scenario. Because they deserve it. If it comes down to they get laid off, you want to give as much notice as possible. And we also want to, John's going to do this, I'm sure. As soon as we know, we're going to say, no, you're safe, come back. And that's it.
I think it's fair to say that we value everybody, and we talk about these reductions as, reducing positions, but these are people, they're human beings, and it's really important. It's the appropriate and the decent thing to do to give them notification because they have their own planning to do, and it's, this is not easy, but again, these are human beings, so I think the notification as soon as possible is really, really important.
Right.
So, and we appreciate the fact that there's going to be those tiered conversations. But again, it's just notification. It's not something that we want to do. But again, it's about doing the decent and appropriate thing.
The last thing I'll just say on this, I was at the high school. My son's in band, so we got we were there, and it was amazing. And the strings group came up and basically blew my socks off. They were across the room. I mean, it was amazing. And if we cut it in middle school, it's going to affect everything. The gym teachers that we have on that list, if we cut those gym teachers and they have to change things around, we could lose some AP classes. Remember, that's what John was, Steve Hill was talking about, right? The Green Meadows 5th grade class, right? That's another one that's going to be, and that's going to affect the whole 5th grade at Green Meadows. And on to everything that we have there. It's devastating. But here's my true fear. And again, I believe music is so important. I've seen it in my son. Since taking band in middle school, he's gotten better at everything. It's amazing. He wasn't a reader, and now he's a reader. It's like, I see the changes in him because of music. But if from my point, the only number I have heard from anyone in Hamden, right, the majority was of the advisory was saying between $450,000 and $460,000 the select board had said it during our meeting with them, 450, 460, and then at advisory, there were several that said 450, not even 460, right? So if we look at that, that's roughly $120,000 to Hamden off of the number that we have put forth. And if you multiply it times 5, I guess we're right around $600,000. That if Hamden sticks with that 450, right, then that would be another $600,000 that we would have. Is that enough? Do we have $600,000 in what my motion was for? Is there $600,000 there?
You do.
All right. Then I would say, as Michelle and Lisa, Tim, everyone has said, out of respect for these people who have served us so well for so long, and it breaks my heart, a lot of the new teachers, when we just got them in and they're doing so well. I know a couple of them really well. No one wants to be here. No one wants to step up and say, let's do this, but I really, truly believe that that's what we get paid for. It's a joke if we don't get paid, but I'm just saying, this is what we volunteered for. So, if anyone has anything to say.
To use a line from Star Wars, when when things are horrible, you win by saving the things you love.
So with that, we will do a vote. So we'll do all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed?
No.
Okay, so motion carries 6-1. Thank you very much.
Now, for you.
I think you have the support of most of us not to have music in the long run. So we're with you, Mike.
So we will continue with the Assistant Superintendent for Finance Operations and Human Resources. Doug.
So we'll begin with the monthly budget update. What you'll notice from my remarks, it's mostly about the fiscal 27 budget in some respects. I think the short story is where our budget sits at the moment is in decent shape at the moment. I mean, obviously, as I've iterated a few different times, we've got a lot of unknowns out there that we're still trying to sort through. But we'll work through this. But as far as just the general position of the budget at the moment, we're in good shape, and it gives us the opportunity to do the strategy that was in the budget that you voted, which is some either repurchasing or delay of or reservation of resource into next year to the tune of a little over $177,000. So I think we're in good position to do that. During the course of the month of April, we're going to start resolving some things that are sitting sort of as unknowns at the moment, or resources that are available but not showing in the budget. Like we've done a number of capital projects. We're going to build the towns for the portion that they have obligation to and get that recouped into our budget. We'll apply some of our things like circuit breaker or school choice revenues to the places in the budget where we made those assignations in our fiscal 26 budget. We'll do that. That'll give us some resources. I'm hoping by the end of April we'll have a much clearer picture of where we sit relative to finishing out fiscal 26, and so then we can explicitly sort of make those choices that we need to make to either purchase or reserve resources for fiscal 27. And with that, I'll stop and just see if there are any questions or anything that someone saw in the report that they wanted to ask about or anything like that. Done. I'll move on. So the next,
Actually, Doug,
yep.
Is there any other money that we have available? Any other, I guess we have some in E&D. Is it what's left in E&D? Is there any left anywhere in the budget that we could potentially use towards this? So,
Fiscal 27?
yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's, moving aside.
Other than what we just said, yes.
I think that we've, largely in the conversations about the budget, we've talked through most of those. I mean, I think, but there is a strategic approach that you want to take with regard to some of those resources. So we have For example, we have some resource that we've accumulated by virtue of rental of the facilities. As a strategy of using that resource to, and again, this is a multi-year sort of lens on this, is to support, some operational things, buying paper goods, that sort of stuff, and that's built into the coming year, and also doing some of the capital projects that haven't been funded and need to be done and are within scope and appropriate use of that. But that's a pretty small thing, all things considered, as far as pushing the needle on the fiscal 27 budget. I think, the largest resources we have that we know about, are things like circuit breaker and school choice and the E&D that's been leveraged there. And I think we've kind of leaned into those to the extent we can lean into those. And one of the things to keep in mind, like with something like E&D, is, and this is part of this year's problem, is we leaned into it by virtue of the conversations. It was it's a cooperative plan to do this. This isn't a blame thing, but the difference between the amount of E&D we used last year and the amount we're going to use this year, or plan to use this year, was a chunk of the gap we were trying to close as far as revenue resources. So, anything else we might do at this point just creates a bigger problem for 28, is one way to think about it. And while there may be improvements in funding sources for 28, I don't know that they recover, any shorter-term spending that we're going to do at this point. So I think it's really challenging to do anything else, would be the short answer. After that long ramble, sorry.
I just was, I think John at one time said something was proposed and we were talking about it, and he says, this is not a good proposal, but not having another teacher, having to lay off a teacher instead of that is just something that we wouldn't want to do. I would hope that we turn over every single rock, look everywhere that we can, and see if there's any more money we can fund to save as many of these positions as we can, because these cuts from the strings, from the gym teachers, from the Green Meadows 5th grade teacher, everything, it has drastic, long-term, deep effects. And if we could save any number of those, just however we do it. And I know you're saying robbing, 28, but, I'm talking about 27. If we can get through 27, then we'll figure out 28.
Can I know, because we were just talking about layoffs, or notices rather, that we're kind of thinking in the mode of those positions going away. But the school committee passed a budget that preserves those positions you were just talking about. We just heard that one of the towns, probably, at least the FinCom supports the budget that keeps the positions you were talking about. We have one question mark, but we don't know. Could be the other town supports the budget that keeps those positions too. So I don't sit here thinking all hope is lost for those positions. We're only providing notice because we don't know. That's all that it says. It doesn't mean that we know that there isn't funding there. It just means that at this point, the time line that we're up against is we have to notify you before we have clarity. That's all that means, really.
So, Sean, I wanted to offer, I think it's important to point out that there definitely can be funding. Either town, if they're in the position where they feel under Proposition 2.5, they do not have adequate revenue to support the budget, has their wherewithal to pursue a 2.5 override to fund the budget. Okay. I know you know this, but I think it needs to be said, right? So, if Hamden can't fund the budget, they can make the decision to pursue 2.5 override, and the people in town can choose to pass a 2.5 override if they want to preserve that elementary school teacher in Green Meadows, and if they want to preserve strings in the middle school, and if they want to preserve the gym teachers in the high school so that we don't lose AP courses. They could even make a request and say, we want to fund additional because we want you to bring back Latin in classes, right? we're partners with the towns. They can do that, right? And, we feel like we're under the hourglass. We're kind of, we advocate with the towns. I don't think negotiate is the right word. We do our best to advocate to get the funding that the schools need. This year, we didn't, we're struggling. We're really struggling, and next year is going to be a whole nother year. But anyway, I think that needed to be said. Because you said, turn over every stone, look under every bush. Either town has the ability to pass a 2.5 override. Fund the budget.
After our last meeting, when the finance committee was here, had a conversation. And the concern that is raised about 2.5 is, there's a couple of them. We don't have sufficient time to organize for a 2.5 override. And if we were to do it this year, we certainly are not going to have the ability to do it next year, which puts in jeopardy the middle school. And it's been a real struggle to get both towns to realize we have to do something about that middle school situation. It's not safe, it's not healthy. And I'm hopeful that the budget this committee passed can come to fruition. And then we can really start working on organizing both communities that we need a 2.5 override for in both towns. And there are other departments in both towns that I'm sure are facing the same kind of situation we are. And then I think we've got a much better chance to put ourselves in a stronger financial position going forward if we have that kind of 2-year plan. Let's get this budget and save as much as we can, especially the music department, if I agree with you 100%, and I'm pretty confident that we can do that. But we have to start planning about changing the way these schools are funded and get people willing to deal with the problem that was created by the 2 towns when we gave up Thornton Burgess and let all those kids have nowhere to go but a middle school that overcrowded it, and a middle school that, quite frankly, is reaching the end of its life. And we've had reports on that for a decade. So I'm as much as I hate to vote for that I just did, I think we have to plan and do our work with both financial bodies in both towns to get them to the realization we have to do something about the middle school. And there may be other things, fire department, police department, whatever, that may also join us, because we need to get ourselves in a solid financial position going forward. And you don't do that in 1 year. That's my thought.
What do you say to the families that can't afford another $500 or $600 in taxes? What do you say? They want this. They want the schools to be great. But what do you say to that? You know, it's really, we have been, the state, I believe, is failing us. The federal government, I believe, is failing us. And the towns are our last line of defense. And the towns are us. It's everyone around this table is going to be paying more in taxes, plus everyone else in both towns. And we have a lot of seniors in both towns, and a lot of seniors who are on fixed income. And I don't know where they're going to find the funds. I mean, you know, I already know enough people. I know some people in town that are taking half as much insulin to make it go longer. I mean, it's a very horrible time, especially financially for everyone. And it's just, it's not that the towns don't want to do it. You know, I just think that it's a large population of both towns just can't do it.
So I agree 100% with your comments, Tim. And I wasn't necessarily advocating for 2.5 override for this year, because politically it was difficult to execute that with only a couple funds. But I think it needed to be said that that's an option that towns do have available. And I think it would be very realistic for both towns to be considering that they're going to be in a position to need to do a 2.5 override next year. The middle school, we can't put the cart before the horse. We don't know if we've been invited in to the program, and I don't think anyone here on this committee would support building a new middle school without the support of the state picking up half of that toll. If we get invited in, then that's when we have to cross the bridge about the debt exclusion that would be necessary to make a project like that. But yeah, I agree with you, Tim.
The other thing I want to say is, if you've been reading the papers, rural school districts are starting to wake up, and they're putting pressure on their reps and their senators. And we're almost 2/3 of the districts are suffering the way we are. And if you can light a fire under our community and other communities are feeling the same thing we are, the real solution to this problem is limited the amount of property taxes that go to the schools replaced by money from the state. The Commonwealth's Constitution puts that squarely in the legislature and the governor's hands. Cherish public education. And what's going on in this Commonwealth, the only way you get them to cherish it is to threaten them. And that's what we did, and that's why the gateway towns have 38% growth while we got 8% growth. And you know what? There's as many children in our districts as there are in the gateways. And that's unfair, that's unjust, and we have to start beating the drum on that, because that's where the real solution is. And that's not going to happen overnight, but this is a good way to start it. Everybody is hurting. There's layoffs going all over the place. And I'm proud of the work you guys have been doing. We've been doing.
There are two items in your agenda packet related to MSBA. The first is a step we have to take relative to the current accelerated repair programs that we have, one at Stony Hill and one at Mile Tree. In your packet is the ICC, which is initial compliance certificate. It's technically signed by the school committee chair, but I thought that there's a whole lot of things we're sort of agreeing to. Mostly there are specifics about the legal conditions of the MSBA process, the things the MSBA will do and won't do, things that we as a community have to do and not do and be aware of relative to our responsibilities, et cetera, et cetera. They're very, I would just say generally, the MSBA is very, very explicit in all of their documentation to make sure that there's no question about what is or is not part of the process. But it can be a little tedious to read through all of it. But nonetheless, the ask for tonight relative to the ICC is just that U.S. Committee approved the chair to sign off on that for us to submit as part of our process. So just that, as well as funding for our schematic design, that initial design phase for these two roof and other items projects are two pieces that have to be in by June 2nd. This is, early, but at the same time, there's no reason not to get it completed and taken care of. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the ICC, but certainly if you wanted to take that action, we appreciate it.
I reviewed this in detail, and I'd like to make a motion to direct the school committee chair to sign the document. And then I have a superfluous question that's irrelevant tonight, but we signed the same document when we put a roof on the middle school.
Probably something similar to it.
I direct everyone to number 7.
Can I second his motion to sign? Thank you.
Questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Okay, motion passes 7-0. Thank you.
Can I make a motion to authorize to submit a statement of interest for Wilbraham Middle School? Huh?
Oh, Lucy, you're gonna have to read that.
What?
You're gonna have to read that.
Oh,
Surprise.
Wow, you suckered her in on that one.
Hey, you know what?
zoinks. All right.
The whole
You
thing has to
can
be
start
read.
that from the motion.
All right, what do I need to read here?
After the motion, language for Wilbraham Middle School. So, sorry, the second paragraph, you can start.
Am I looking at the April 2nd, 2026 movement of concern?
You're looking at the,
Statutory priority,
the memo, so you're going to be,
where am I
The
looking?
next,
Oh, just the memo.
the next page, I think.
so look at the memo and start
Oh,
with,
okay.
I move that the school committee resolve to have a convened and
Okay.
open, and just keep on reading until you run out of words.
I'm reading all the statutories too?
Yep.
Oh my. Okay, here we go. Having convened in an open meeting on April 2nd, 2026, prior to the SOI submission closing date, the Regional School Committee of Hampton-Wilbraham Regional School District, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form dated April 17th, 2026 for the Wilbraham Middle School located at 466 Stony Hill Road, Wilbraham, Mass. 01095, which describes and explains the following deficiencies and the priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future. Statutory priority 2, elimination of existing severe overcrowding as evidenced by the repurposing of the entire library, spaces intended for storage, the auditorium stage, etc., as instructional spaces by the replacement, renovation, or modernization of school facility systems and spaces to create more appropriate and better learning environments for students. Statutory priority 4, prevention of severe overcrowding expected to result from increased enrollment, projected by the annual New England School Development Council enrollment projections by the replacement, renovation, or modernization of school facility systems and spaces to create more appropriate and better learning environments for students. Statutory priority 5, replacement, renovation, or modernization of school facility systems to include the exterior doors and windows, utility systems, electrical, plumbing, heating, cooling, ventilation, etc., to maintain or replace the building, increasing energy conservation and decrease energy-related costs in the school, and to increase the security and safety of the facility. Statutory priority 7, replacement of or addition to an obsolete building evidenced by the current building infrastructure reaching its end of life or maximum capacity, subpar physical environments for education, and challenges in providing a fully safe school environment in order to provide for a full range of programs consistent with the state and approved local requirements. And hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting this statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant, or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the Hampton-Wilbraham Regional School District to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Second.
Questions or discussion?
Yes. When we submit this, and if we do get approved, and then they come and they do their research, and then they decide that the cost to do it to that building versus the cost of building a new building somewhere, say, on our campus here or on 35 acres in Hamden, that I heard was available to the school district potentially. Would the language that was just voted and seconded be enough?
So I can answer that. So, yes, it would. Because most, the descriptions of the problems were things I wrote into that. The other parts where it says replacement and of or addition to and obsolete building, that part, and then so that the, those things are language they offer, and those are actually the statutory priority language. We fill in the part where we describe a little bit of what we're trying to get with this. So yes, that would work. One of the other things is in the application, you make a choice as to whether you're explicitly looking for, a renovation addition or a replacement. And the thing to do in that circumstance is to take the most, or the largest approach, which when I do this will be to choose a new building. If they decide through the research that that's not the case, then that will be how we'll be invited in differently. They can scale down, but they can scale up. But the language here should be sufficient.
All right, thank you.
In the reasons stated here, growth of enrollment, I think we're ignoring one of the major causes is that we lost the use of Thornton Burgess as a middle school. And all children in both towns have to attend Wilbraham Middle School. And that is a major portion of why it's so overcrowded. And that's the reality.
That's true. One of the pieces of the application is a affirmation of any closing of any school. So we do have to articulate that we did close a school. Within, I forget what the time frame is, but since we've closed it's in there. So we will have to have that as part of our application. Might that work against our application? It might. But at the same time, at this point, the sort of countervailing piece that we'll put in there is, it's not an option now because the town has taken it over for its own purposes. And it's owned by it's owned by the town of Hammond, and they've taken it for other purposes, and therefore it's not an option. So I think those will work against each other it'll paint the full picture and the full context, and hopefully not have a negative, or severely negative impact on our application.
Any additional discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. 7-0.
Thank you all.
So we are on public comment. Is there anyone here that's interested in making public comment this evening? Okay, if you could come up to there's a microphone. Sure. Proceed.
There's a button in the middle.
So if you wouldn't mind when you sit down, if you could just state your name and your affiliation with the district, and while the green light is on, we'll be able to hear you. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Christine. I'm a parent here in Wilbraham. I have 4 children. Their ages are 11, 10 as of yesterday, 4 almost, and 20 months. So we moved here about a year and a half ago from Agawam, seeking a better school district. Not that there was anything bad about Agawam. We loved our school, our principal, our teachers. We were looking, at different towns and ratings, and we chose Wilbraham as a place that we wanted to land and live long-term for the school district. So far, we have loved the school district. We have loved our teachers, staff, across the board. The concern that I'm here about this evening, despite being very tired and working all day, I needed to make the sacrifice of time because I appreciate you all's time, and you all are doing this on a more consistent basis than I am, of course. But I am here about the School Road School car line. So we started started the school year walking because we thought this is good for our children. When we were growing up, we were walking in the middle of blizzards a mile away to the school. And we not only survived it, but we were better for it. And so our children were walking, and we decided to pull that back because there were not sidewalks, and the school road curve is just too dangerous and people are going too fast. And also the weather this winter was not conducive to walking at all for anyone, I don't think. So then we switched to the bus, which had its own set of challenges. I won't go into the personal issue that my family had with the bus company because I don't think it's appropriate to do, but we had multiple issues with the bus company, and some of them are not personal, they're townwide. People not feeling like they can send their kids on the bus for a multitude of reasons. One basic thing is just, I think, the school time change and the lack of drivers, not just for Massachusetts and Wilbraham, but I think probably nationwide people are struggling to staff post-COVID. And so the school bus has not been a system that we could rely on as a family. So we decided, again, to change our plan, to shift, to pivot, to do what we have to do for our kids, and to just start dropping our kids off. So I was late to work a bunch, but we figured out the schedule. The Mile Tree bus driver waits in our driveway, even though he doesn't have to, and that delays his route, but so that we can get our other kids to School Road, come back to our home to get our autistic child onto a bus to Mile Tree, because he doesn't do well with change, and so switching him to drop off would not have worked for us. So we've been doing Carline for a little while now, and we were just following what everyone else was doing. We're new to town, we're not really familiar with the challenges that, as I learned from other parents discussing this issue, has been a long-term issue, I think. So we were in a car accident on Friday, and we were turning left, facing west, and I don't really want to discuss the accident. I just want to point out that I don't believe that the car line is safe. I don't believe that people passing the car line are safe. I have some notes if you don't mind me just taking a look. So parents should not have to rely on guesswork, wondering, should I be on the shoulder? Should I be in the lane? Is this legal? Is this not legal? Am I going to be safe to take a left turn? I don't know that I've received any guidance, even after conversations with principal, superintendent, the staff from the bus company directly. I was never given guidance about any sort of means to get my kids to school in a way that made sense, that was safe. I feel as though now we basically have a reasonable accommodation and we drop our kids off at the front of the school, which is not really realistic for all of the families in Wilbraham. And I hate to be the one family that is taking advantage of like a special accommodation, because that doesn't feel great either. Because I believe that all children and all families deserve to have access to dropping off their children at school or having a bus that comes on time, so that they can go to work and live their lives and do what they have to do for their children. As we've all talked about here at length, well, not myself, I've just been observing, but there are a lot of challenges for everyone in town and throughout the state personally, financially, and honestly, giving you this information after everything I've heard feels a little bit in poor taste, because I know that you all are already dealing with multiple challenges. But I am just petitioning the community, the school, to find a way to make the School Road car line either single file facing east so that no one has to cross a double line, no one has to veer into oncoming traffic to get their children to school. Cars that are passing are not forced to violate the law to get through. We are just looking for the school district to take this issue seriously, because I think it's been going on for a long time according to other parents. I can't speak to that myself. But I did post this issue to Facebook, sort of as a social experiment to get commentary from the community that maybe otherwise I wouldn't have gotten. You know, just sort of asking questions, open-ended, what do you think of this? Take a look at this video, who do you think's at fault, kind of thing, just to elicit some responses. And about half the people said, hey, your car's at fault. The other half said, oh, the other guy's definitely at fault. So people just don't understand, one way or the other, what is safe and what isn't, and what is the law and what isn't. My insurance company says that we're not at fault. but the police department says that we are. So no one really is in agreement. And so I believe that that amount of gray area and confusion when it comes to transporting our children to school should not be allowed. We should really be taking it seriously. And I'm here today because my daughter has to return to School Road next year, and I have 2 other children who will be moving into that school as well at some point. And even if I didn't, I think it's just an important topic for the community at large to understand. And if we have to plan this out, as many large issues have to be resolved that way, fine. But I don't think it should just sit untouched, unnoticed, while families in town are getting into car accidents, dropping their kids off at school. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming to talk, Christine.
Thank you.
It was hard.
Thank you. Is everybody okay
Could I,
from the accident?
Sort of.
Sort of, okay.
Yeah. Should I stay, or I was just gonna go? Yeah.
sorry, yeah.
No, we just listen, we actually don't respond. It may be a future agenda item.
Michelle, I wanted to request that we had a future agenda item added to the agenda to discuss the school road drop-off, and perhaps we could invite a representative from the Wilbraham Police Department to talk about the road situation and possible recommendations, and also the building principal, and anyone else that John thinks might be helpful for the discussion.
Maybe some pictures.
Can we add the Stony Hill School as well?
Every other school.
Yeah, I would say every other school in the district. Can we do maybe have a subcommittee or something look into this? Can we really start looking at that? Because I think at every single school there's issues. So, and this is something that someone got hurt, you know, and we don't want that. So let us take a look at all of the schools, if you wouldn't mind me extending the...
I don't think that's a bad idea. I think that might be a bit much to do all in one meeting, so maybe we do pick one school a meeting.
Well, point
Subcommittee.
taken by everybody.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
All right, so we will continue. Is there anyone else that's interested in making public comment?
I think the police ought to be invited to this as well.
That's what, yep, that was
The
requested.
police need to be on the same page,
Yep.
and we gotta publicize this stuff.
Is there anyone else here that's interested in making public comment? Are you sure? Okay. So we will continue with the subcommittee updates. So we will start with the curriculum subcommittee.
No update.
Okay, planning committee update. John, anything to add?
I would just direct everyone's attention to the memo from me dated March 26th to the planning committee. It basically provides a graphical representation on page 2 of the, I know we said earlier that we don't necessarily engage in negotiations, but sometimes when you get engaged in negotiations, and I would say the regional agreement has been a negotiation, multilateral negotiation over the course of several years with many parties. This basically takes us through the different phases that have evolved over the course of that process. I brought this to the planning committee just for the purpose of trying to get things started. I would say that the conversation at the planning committee from my perspective was constructive and hopeful. My hope was that we could sort of re-engage the negotiation process, really based on the fact that one of the things that has changed the state of play was the decision, which was a collaborative decision between the 2 towns and the school committee, to submit a statement of interest for the middle school, which then I think adjusts maybe the sticking point, which is the current status of the middle school. In the immediate future, we'll be significantly rethinking our approach to capital improvements for the middle school, because we want to see if we're invited into the core program, and if so, we certainly are not going to make massive investments into a building that we're thinking about decommissioning. And then just the idea that we have that commitment, that our vision is to someday get into some kind of renovation or reconstruction, says that this is time limited in some way. And so thinking about knowing that that is a commitment that has a time horizon on it, we may not know exactly what the time horizon is, but that also creates a financial sort of cap to it. May create some flexibility for positions to shift. At that planning meeting, it was shared that the town administrators from the two towns had some informal conversations around maybe a framework for an agreement that had to do with basically maybe an interim agreement with some, would basically involve the district developing a plan for what it foresees as the needs of the town over the short term, and then maybe developing an interim capital plan with some caps for the two communities. I think that was received with some interest, and so that meeting ended with a commitment for the two sides to meet and continue discussions on different concepts that might allow us to get from where we are to language that could allow us to move forward on the regional agreement. I'm a little unclear, I have to say, on sort of time horizon. I have tried to reach out to get clarity on whether we want to try to move forward with the town meetings. I do know that both select boards have put placeholders in their annual town meetings, so that if we were to have some language that really resonates with the parties, that we could try to bring that forward. But I'm a little unclear on whether everyone thinks that's realistic for this time frame. So I'm trying to clarify that. But that is, I think, the important salient points from that meeting.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, so Finance, Operations, and Technology Subcommittee, Mike?
We have not had a meeting since school committee voted on the budget. And I don't have anything to add beyond the discussions that we've had.
Okay, thank you. We will continue with the LPVEC Collaborative Representative, Lisa.
I had a question, but it goes with this, but I don't know. I'll ask for next meeting.
Okay.
A question came up at LPVEC, and I didn't have time to ask, and I'm not really sure where to ask or where to start, so I'm not even. I'll figure it out and get back to you for next meeting.
Okay.
It's nothing terrible.
Do you want to make a request that a question be put on the agenda for the next meeting? You could just tell them if you want to.
Okay, no pressure. We'll continue. Negotiation Subcommittee. Only report is our next session. We have our next mediation session on April 9th at 4:45 after the equity walk. Policy Subcommittee, Mike?
We have done that, but we have a meeting scheduled. Right, last week of April?
Wednesday, April 29th.
At 5 o'clock.
And do you have anything to report on the corporation, LPVEC Corporation?
I don't have anything to report. They sent me something to sign. I reviewed it and I signed it like appropriate expenses.
Good job. And there's nothing to report on the superintendent evaluation. So we'll move on to the consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries 7-0. Our next meeting is Thursday, April 16th. It's here in the IRC at 6:30 p.m. We do have the need for executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, see Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. MIAA update, units A and C contracts, and sick bank for organ donation. Mass General Law, see 30A, Section 21A, 7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law, specifically Mass General Laws, Chapter 214, Section 1B, Massachusetts Students' Records Law, Mass General Law, Chapter 71, Section 34D, Massachusetts Student Records Regulations 6 and 3, CMR 23 Sequentia, and Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, 20 USC Section 1232G, and 34 CFR Part 99 regarding student transfer requests.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we will not be returning to the regular session. We will be adjourning from both our regular session and executive session and executive session. So we will do roll calls, move into executive session. Cheryl. Tim.
Yes.
Sean.
Aye.
Lisa.
Yes.
Raj.
Yes.
Mike.
Yep.
Myself, yes. We're now moved to executive session, 8:25 p.m. Enjoy your weekend, everyone.